In a busy diner in the heart of New York City, the clatter of plates and the hum of conversation filled the air. It was just another ordinary day for most people, but for one man sitting quietly at a corner booth, it felt different. This man was no stranger to wealth or power. He was a billionaire who had built an empire from scratch through hard work, determination, and sometimes ruthless decisions. His name wasn't important here. What mattered was that he rarely stepped foot into places like this. Yet today, something about the simplicity of the diner drew him in. The billionaire sat alone, sipping on a cup of coffee as he watched the world go by outside the window. The streets were alive with people rushing to their destinations, each absorbed in their own lives. Inside the diner, things weren't much different. Waitresses darted between tables, carrying trays loaded with food, while customers chatted and laughed. But amidst all the chaos, one person caught his eye. A young waitress juggling multiple tasks at once. She looked tired, her hair tied back in a messy ponytail, and her uniform slightly wrinkled. She moved quickly, balancing plates and refilling drinks without missing a beat. What stood out even more was the small stroller parked near the counter where she worked. Inside it lay a baby, peacefully sleeping despite the noise around them. Every now and then she would glance over at the child, her face softening with love before returning to her duties. Something about her struck a chord deep within him. Maybe it was the way she handled everything thrown at her with such grace, or maybe it was the faint sadness in her eyes that reminded him of someone he used to know. Whatever it was, he couldn't look away. Watching her brought back memories he had long buried. The memory of his daughter, who had vanished years ago under mysterious circumstances. Lost in thought, he barely noticed when she approached his table to drop off the check. When she did, though, their eyes met briefly. Hers were warm but weary, and there was a resilience in them that spoke volumes. "Thank you," she said softly, offering a polite smile before hurrying off to help another customer. As he reached for his wallet to pay, an idea came to him. Why not leave her a little extra? Not because he expected anything in return, but because it felt like the right thing to do. So, after placing some bills on the table, he added a crisp $150 note underneath. Then grabbing a pen, he scribbled a quick message on a napkin. For brighter days ahead. He left the diner soon after, feeling lighter than he had in years. Little did he know, however, that this small act of kindness would set off a chain of events neither of them could have predicted. For the waitress, finding that unexpected gift later that evening would be the start of something extraordinary, a story neither of them could have imagined. And so, what began as a simple moment of generosity turned into something far greater. A billionaire's random act of kindness became the spark that ignited a journey full of surprises, emotions, and revelations. Sometimes, life has a way of connecting us in ways we least expect, and this was only the beginning. The next day, the billionaire found himself drawn back to the same diner. He didn't know why exactly. He told himself it was just curiosity, a need to see if his gesture had made any difference. Deep down, though, he knew it was more than that. Something about the waitress and her quiet strength stayed with him, lingering in his mind like an unanswered question. When he walked in, the place was just as lively as it had been the day before. The familiar smell of coffee and fried food greeted him, and the chatter of customers filled the air. He spotted her immediately. She was rushing between tables, balancing plates and refilling drinks with practiced ease. Her movements were efficient, but there was a tiredness in her step that hadn't been there the day before, or maybe he was just noticing it now. As she passed by his booth, their eyes met again. This time, her expression softened into a smile. "You're back," she said, her voice warm but tinged with surprise. He nodded, feeling a little awkward. "I thought I'd check out the coffee again. It's good." She chuckled softly, clearly amused by his attempt at small talk. "Well, I'll make sure you get the best cup we've got." When she returned with his coffee, she lingered for a moment, her hands resting on the edge of the tray. "I wanted to say thank you for yesterday. That money, it really helped. More than you can imagine." Her words caught him off guard. He hadn't expected gratitude like that. Not so openly expressed, not with such sincerity. "It was nothing," he murmured, waving a hand dismissively. But even as he said it, he knew it wasn't true. To her, it had meant something significant. And somehow knowing that made him feel lighter. Their conversation continued in fits and starts, interrupted by her duties around the diner. She told him bits and pieces about her life, how she worked long hours to support herself and her baby, how she dreamed of going back to school someday but couldn't figure out how to make it happen. He listened intently, nodding along, offering encouraging words when he could. There was a resilience in her that he admired, a determination to keep moving forward despite the odds stacked against her. But then, as she leaned over to refill his cup, something caught his eye. Around her neck hung a delicate silver pendant, a habu locket engraved with tiny stars. His breath caught in his throat. It was small, almost unnoticeable, but to him, it felt like a punch to the gut. He knew that locket. He had seen it before, in a photograph tucked away in a drawer in memories he had tried so hard to forget. "Where did you get that?" he asked suddenly, his voice sharper than he intended. She blinked, startled by the intensity of his tone. Her fingers instinctively went to the pendant, brushing it lightly. "Oh, it's old. My mom gave it to me when I was a baby. Well, my birth mom, I guess. She left it with me before." Her voice trailed off and she looked away, her cheeks flushing slightly. The billionaire's heart raced. He wanted to ask more, to demand answers, but he forced himself to stay calm. "It's beautiful," he said instead, his voice steadier now. "Those stars. They're unique." She smiled faintly, her fingers still tracing the edges of the pendant. "Yeah, I always thought so too. I don't know much about it though, just that it's special." Special. The word echoed in his mind. Yes, it was special, all too special, because he remembered the day he had bought that exact locket years ago. He had picked it out carefully, choosing the design because it reminded him of the constellations they used to stargaze at together. It was a gift he had given to his daughter on her 8th birthday, a token of love and hope for her future. And then, one day, she, and the locket, had vanished without a trace. Could it be possible? Could this young woman wearing the pendant be connected to his past in some way? The thought was both exhilarating and terrifying. Part of him wanted to grab her by the shoulders and demand the truth right then and there. But another part, the rational part, knew he needed to tread carefully. If he pushed too hard, too fast, he might scare her away. Or worse, he might be wrong. So he kept his questions casual, steering the conversation toward her childhood. She shared what little she knew, how she had been adopted as a baby, how her adoptive parents had raised her with love but had few details about her biological family. They had told her once that her birth mother had left her at the hospital shortly after giving birth, leaving behind only the locket as a keepsake. Each word she spoke sent a jolt through him. It was too coincidental, too perfect, or perhaps too tragic. He couldn't shake the feeling that fate had brought them together for a reason, but proving it would take more than intuition. It would take proof. By the time he left the diner that day, his mind was spinning with questions. Who was she really? Was she the daughter he had lost all those years ago? Or was this just another cruel twist of fate, teasing him with possibilities that might never come true? As he stepped out onto the busy street, he realized one thing for certain. He wouldn't rest until he found out the truth. Whatever it took, whatever path it led him down, he was ready to follow it. Because for the first time in years, he felt alive, with purpose, with hope, and with the faintest glimmer of a chance to fix the mistakes of his past. The billionaire couldn't stop thinking about the waitress and the pendant. It haunted him. Not in a bad way, but like a puzzle that needed solving or a door slightly ajar, beckoning him to step through. He found himself returning to the diner, more often than he cared to admit. At first, he told himself it was just curiosity, a need to understand if his hunch held any weight. But as days turned into weeks, he realized it wasn't just curiosity driving him. It was hope. Hope that maybe, just maybe, this young woman could be the missing piece of his life. Every time he visited, they talked a little more. She was guarded, at first understandably so. Strangers didn't usually show up repeatedly asking personal questions, especially strangers who happened to be billionaires. But over time, she began to open up. There was something about the way he listened, not with pity, but with genuine interest, that made her feel comfortable. She shared bits and pieces of her story, how she had grown up in a small town with loving adoptive parents, how she had always wondered about her biological family but never pursued answers because it felt too overwhelming. He learned about her struggles too, the long hours working double shifts to make ends meet, the sacrifices she made for her child, the dreams she put on hold. Each detail painted a picture of someone resilient, someone who carried burdens far heavier than most people realized. And yet, despite everything, she still smiled. That smile stayed with him long after their conversations ended. But what truly consumed him was the pendant, the locket with the tiny stars. Every time he saw it resting against her chest, it pulled at something deep inside him. Memories flooded back, memories he had tried to bury for years. He remembered the excitement of picking it out, the joy on his daughter's face when he gave it to her. He remembered the way she used to wear it every day, refusing to take it off even when it got tangled in her hair. And then, the emptiness that followed when both she and the locket disappeared without a trace. One evening after leaving the diner, he sat alone in his car, staring at the steering wheel. His mind raced with possibilities. What if she really was his daughter? What if all these years of searching, wondering, blaming himself were about to come to an end? But what if he was wrong? What if this was just another dead end, another cruel twist of fate? He knew he couldn't leave it to chance. If there was even the smallest possibility that she was his daughter, he owed it to himself, and to her, to find out. So he did what came naturally to him. He used his resources. The next morning, he hired a private investigator, someone discreet and highly skilled. Together, they pieced together what little information she had shared about her past. Her adoption, records, the hospital where she was born, the timeline. It all pointed toward something extraordinary. What they uncovered left him breathless. According to the records, there had been 2 babies born on the same day at the same hospital, one belonging to him and his ex-wife, and another to a young woman who had given birth anonymously. Somehow, somewhere along the line, there had been a mix-up, a clerical error, a mistake that changed lives forever. The investigator laid out the evidence carefully, explaining how it was possible. "It's rare," he said, "but not unheard of. Hospitals can make mistakes, and based on what we found, it seems likely that your daughter may have been given to the wrong family." The words hit him like a freight train. All those years of guilt, of wondering why his daughter vanished, of blaming himself for not being there when she needed him most. It hadn't been his fault. Not entirely. Someone else's hands had shaped this tragedy, and now, decades later, fate might finally be giving him a second chance. But with the revelation came a new set of challenges. How do you approach someone with news like this? How do you tell a person that everything they thought they knew about their life might not be true? He imagined her reaction: shock, anger, confusion. Would she believe him? Would she want anything to do with him after learning the truth? For days he wrestled with these questions, pacing his penthouse apartment late at night while the city slept below. He replayed every interaction he'd had with her, searching for clues about how she might react. In the end, he decided there was only one way forward: honesty. No tricks, no manipulation, just the raw, unfiltered truth. So, he prepared. He gathered old photographs, letters, anything that could prove his claims. He rehearsed what he would say, trying to find the right balance between compassion and clarity. And when he felt ready, or as ready as he could ever be, he went back to the diner. This time, he didn't sit in his usual booth. Instead, he waited outside, watching as she finished her shift. When she stepped out into the cool evening air, he approached her cautiously, holding the photo album tightly in his hands. "Can we talk?" he asked, his voice trembling slightly. "There's something I need to tell you." She looked at him, surprised but not alarmed. After a moment, she nodded. "Okay," she said softly. "Let's talk." As they walked to a nearby park bench, he felt the weight of the world on his shoulders. This was it, the moment of truth. Whatever happened next would change both their lives forever. The park was quiet, bathed in the soft glow of streetlights as they sat down on a weathered wooden bench. The air carried a slight chill, but neither of them seemed to notice. For a moment, there was only silence between them, the kind of silence that feels heavy with unspoken words, like the calm before a storm. The billionaire clutched the photo album tightly in his hands, his knuckles white from the effort. He didn't know where to start. How do you tell someone their entire life might be built on a lie? How do you explain something so impossible without sounding like you've lost your mind? His heart pounded in his chest, each beat echoing louder than the last. Finally, he took a deep breath and began. "I need to show you something," he said, his voice low but steady. He opened the album and turned it toward her. The first page held a faded photograph of a little girl with bright eyes and curly hair, smiling widely as she held up a birthday cake. Next to it was another picture, this one of her wearing the same locket now resting around the waitress's neck. She stared at the photos, her brow furrowing as confusion washed over her face. "Who is this?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "That's my daughter," he replied, his tone thick with emotion. "Or at least, I thought she was." Her head snapped up, her eyes locking onto his. "What are you saying?" He hesitated, searching for the right words. I believe, you might be her." For a moment, she just looked at him, her expression unreadable. Then slowly she shook her head. "That's not possible. I'm adopted. My parents told me everything. They said my birth mom left me when I was a baby." "I know," he said quickly, leaning forward. "And I don't think it was intentional. Something happened. A mistake at the hospital. You were switched with another baby." The words hung in the air between them, heavy and surreal. She blinked rapidly, as if trying to process what he had just said. "You're telling me I'm not who I thought I was? That my whole life has been wrong?" "It's complicated," he admitted, running a hand through his hair. "But yes, that's what I'm saying. I've spent years looking for my daughter, wondering why she disappeared. And then I met you. When I saw that locket..." His voice cracked, and he paused, swallowing hard. "It's hers. It's the one I gave her." She glanced down at the pendant hanging from her neck, her fingers instinctively brushing against it. For years it had been a symbol of mystery, a connection to a mother she never knew. Now it felt like a key unlocking a door to a past she couldn't even begin to comprehend. "I don't understand," she murmured, shaking her head again. "Why would you come to me with this? What proof do you have?" He nodded, expecting the skepticism. Reaching into his pocket, he pulled out a folded document and handed it to her. "This is a copy of the adoption records we found. And here..." He flipped through the photo album again, stopping at a picture of a young couple holding a newborn baby. "This is me and my wife, the day our daughter was born." She studied the image carefully, her hands trembling slightly. There was no denying the resemblance, the shape of the baby's face, the curve of her tiny nose. It was uncanny. Still, doubt lingered in her eyes. Even if this is true, why now? Why after all these years? "Because I never stopped looking," he said simply, his voice breaking. "Every day I wondered where she was, if she was safe, if she hated me for not being there. I blamed myself for losing her. But now I think maybe I didn't lose her at all. Maybe she was taken from me." Tears welled up in his eyes, and for the first time, she saw him not as a wealthy stranger or a customer at the diner, but as a man burdened by loss and regret. A father desperate to find his child. She looked away, staring off into the distance as she processed everything he had said. Part of her wanted to dismiss it all as crazy, to walk away and pretend this conversation never happened. But another part, a deeper, quieter part, knew there was truth in his words. The pendant, the photos, the raw emotion in his voice, it all added up to something she couldn't ignore. "What happens next?" she asked finally, her voice barely audible. "We take a DNA test," he replied gently. "If it confirms what I believe, then we figure it out together. But only if you're willing." She hesitated, weighing her options. This wasn't just about her. It was about the son waiting for her at home, the life she had built, the identity she had always known. Yet, despite the fear and uncertainty, she felt a flicker of hope, a chance to answer questions she had carried her entire life. "Okay," she said softly, nodding. "Let's do it." Relief flooded his face, followed by a wave of gratitude. "Thank you," he whispered, his voice choked with emotion. "You have no idea what this means to me." As they sat there under the dim light of the street lamp, the enormity of the moment settled over them. Neither knew what the future held, but for the first time in years, they both felt a glimmer of possibility, a chance to rewrite the stories they had lived with for so long. Whatever the results of the test, their lives would never be the same again. The days leading up to the DNA test felt like an eternity for both of them. For the billionaire, every second was a mix of hope and dread. He replayed their conversation in the park over and over in his mind, wondering if he had pushed too hard or said the wrong thing. What if she changed her mind? What if the results came back negative, shattering the fragile connection they had begun to build? The uncertainty gnawed at him, keeping him awake at night. For the waitress, life continued as usual, or at least it tried to. She went through her daily routine, waking up early, feeding her son, heading to work, and managing the endless tasks that came with being a single mother. But beneath the surface, her thoughts were consumed by what the billionaire had told her. Could it really be true? Was she someone else's child entirely? The idea was overwhelming, almost surreal. Yet deep down, part of her already believed him. Something about the way he spoke, the raw honesty in his voice, felt undeniable. When the day of the DNA test finally arrived, they met at a quiet clinic tucked away in a corner of the city. Neither of them said much on the way there. Words seemed unnecessary. The weight of the moment hung heavy between them, unspoken but palpable. Inside the clinic, the procedure itself was quick and simple. A swab of the cheek, a few forms signed, and then silence as they waited for the results. The wait was agonizing. Days stretched into what felt like weeks. During that time, they kept their distance, unsure of how to act around each other. The billionaire sent her a text once, asking if she needed anything. She replied politely, thanking him but saying she was fine. It wasn't cold exactly, but there was a hesitancy in their exchanges now, a cautiousness born out of fear. Fear of disappointment, fear of rejection, fear of change. And then one afternoon, the call came. The lab technician's voice was calm and professional as she delivered the news. The DNA test confirms a biological relationship. You are father and daughter. The billionaire sat frozen, the phone pressed against his ear. His vision blurred, and for a moment, he thought he might collapse. Tears streamed down his face unchecked, years of guilt, grief, and longing pouring out all at once. When he finally managed to speak, his voice was hoarse. "Thank you," he whispered, barely audible. He called her immediately, his hands shaking, as he dialed the number. "It's done," he said when she answered. We're family." On the other end of the line, she let out a shaky breath. She had expected the news, yet hearing it still hit her like a tidal wave. Her knees buckled slightly and she sank into a chair, clutching the phone tightly. "Are you sure?" she asked, her voice trembling. "Yes," he replied, his tone firm despite the tears still streaming down his face. "There's no doubt you're my daughter." For a long while, neither of them spoke. They simply stayed on the line, listening to each other breathe, processing the enormity of what this meant. Finally, she broke the silence. "What do we do now?" "We take it slow," he said softly. "I don't want to rush you into anything. This is your journey too, and I'll respect whatever pace you need." She nodded, even though he couldn't see her. "Okay," she murmured. "Okay." Over the next few weeks, they began spending more time together. At first, it was awkward. Two strangers trying to bridge decades of separation. They started with small things, sharing meals, walking through parks, talking about everything and nothing. He listened intently as she told him stories from her childhood, about growing up in a loving adoptive family who had given her stability and care. She listened as he opened up about his own struggles, the mistakes he'd made, the guilt he carried for not being there when she needed him most. Through these conversations, they began to heal. For him, it was a chance to make amends, not just to her but to himself. For so long, he had been consumed by regret, convinced that losing her was entirely his fault. Now learning the truth, that it had been a hospital error, not his failure, was liberating. It didn't erase the pain, but it allowed him to forgive himself, bit by bit. For her, it was a revelation. Growing up, she had always wondered about her biological parents, imagining scenarios where they were heroes or villains. Meeting him, seeing the depth of his love and remorse, painted a completely different picture. She realized he wasn't perfect. He admitted as much. But he was human, and for the first time in her life, she felt connected to her past in a way that made sense. Their bond grew stronger with each passing day. He introduced her to his world, the penthouse apartment overlooking the city, the boardrooms where he made billion-dollar deals, the charities he supported. She showed him hers, the cozy little apartment filled with toys and books, the diner where she worked, the friends who had stood by her through thick and thin. Slowly, their two worlds began to merge, creating something new and beautiful. One evening, as they sat together on the couch flipping through old photo albums, she paused on a picture of a young girl blowing out candles on a birthday cake. "Was this me?" she asked, pointing to the image. He smiled, nodding. "Yes. That was your 8th birthday. You loved stargazing, so I got you that locket with the stars engraved on it. I remember you refusing to take it off even when it got caught in your hair." She touched the pendant around her neck, a soft smile spreading across her face. "It must have meant a lot to me." "It did," he said quietly. "And it means a lot to me too. Finding it again, finding you, it's like getting a second chance at life." As they sat there surrounded by memories old and new, she realized something profound. This wasn't just about discovering her true identity. It was about forgiveness, acceptance, and love. Both of them had lost so much, but in finding each other, they had gained something far greater. A family, a future, a reason to keep moving forward, together. As months turned into years, their relationship continued to grow stronger. The billionaire had once been a man defined by his wealth and power, but now he was something else entirely. A father rediscovering what truly mattered in life. For her part, the waitress embraced this new chapter with a mix of wonder and gratitude. It wasn't always easy. There were moments of doubt, confusion, and even tears, but they faced it all together, learning from each other every step of the way. He became a regular presence in her life, not just as a figure of support, but as an active participant. On weekends, he would visit her apartment, playing with her son and helping him build puzzles or read books. The little boy quickly grew fond of his grandfather, laughing at his silly jokes and clinging to him during bedtime stories. Watching them interact brought tears to her eyes. It was a bond she never thought possible, one that filled gaps she hadn't realized existed. At first, she worried about how her adoptive parents would react to this revelation. They had raised her with love and care, giving her everything they could. When she finally gathered the courage to tell them, their reaction surprised her. Instead of feeling hurt or betrayed, they hugged her tightly and told her how happy they were for her. "We've always wanted you to find answers," her adoptive mother said, wiping away tears. "Now you have a chance to know your whole story." With time, she introduced him to her adoptive family too. Those meetings were emotional but healing. They shared meals, told stories, and laughed over old memories. Her adoptive father shook his hand firmly and said, "Thank you for trusting us to raise her when we did." It was a moment of closure for everyone involved, a reminder that love comes in many forms and doesn't diminish because of circumstance. Meanwhile, the billionaire began making changes in his own life. He scaled back on work, delegating more responsibilities to trusted colleagues so he could focus on rebuilding what truly mattered: family. He started attending school events, cheering loudly from the bleachers during her son's soccer games, or sitting quietly in the audience during parent-teacher conferences. Each small act deepened their connection, proving that presence, not presence, was what counted most. One evening, as they sat together on the balcony of his penthouse overlooking the city lights, she turned to him and asked, "Do you ever regret looking for me?" He looked at her, his expression thoughtful. "No," he said after a pause. "Not for a second. Finding you has given me purpose again. You remind me of who I used to be before. Well, before I lost sight of what really mattered." She smiled softly, leaning her head against his shoulder. "I think finding you has done the same for me. I spent so long wondering about my past, feeling like something was missing. Now I know why." Their journey wasn't without challenges. There were days when old wounds resurfaced, when guilt or anger threatened to creep in, but they faced those moments head-on, talking openly and honestly until the storm passed. Through it all, they learned to forgive, not just each other, but themselves. Forgiveness became the foundation of their relationship, allowing them to move forward with hope instead of lingering in the shadows of the past. Inspired by their experience, the billionaire decided to use his resources to help others in similar situations. He founded a nonprofit organization dedicated to reuniting families separated by adoption mix-ups or other circumstances beyond their control. The initiative provided counseling, financial assistance, and legal aid to those seeking answers about their origins. It also funded research into improving hospital protocols to prevent such errors from happening again. When the organization launched, she stood beside him at the press conference, holding his hand tightly. As cameras flashed and reporters fired questions, she felt a surge of pride. This wasn't just about them anymore. It was about creating opportunities for others to find the same peace and closure they had found together. Years later, as she walked across the stage to receive her college diploma, he watched from the audience, tears streaming down his face. She had worked tirelessly to earn that degree, juggling school, work, and motherhood while refusing to give up. Seeing her there, dressed in cap and gown, made him realize how far they had both come. Afterward, they celebrated with dinner at her favorite restaurant. Over dessert, she raised her glass and said, "To brighter days ahead for both of us." He clinked his glass against hers, smiling warmly. "And to second chances." In the end, their story wasn't just about loss or reunion. It was about resilience, forgiveness, and the unbreakable bonds of family. A single act of kindness had set everything in motion, proving that sometimes the smallest gestures can lead to the greatest transformations. Together, they had built a future neither of them could have imagined alone, a future full of love, purpose, and endless possibilities. As the years rolled on, their lives continued to intertwine in ways neither of them could have predicted. What had started as a chance encounter in a diner blossomed into something deeper, a partnership rooted not just in blood, but in mutual respect and understanding. They weren't perfect, no family ever is, but they learned to navigate the highs and lows together, finding strength in each other when times got tough. The billionaire, once consumed by his empire, now found joy in simpler things. He loved watching her son grow up, marveling at how much he reminded him of her when she was little. The boy's laughter filled rooms with warmth, and his curiosity about the world mirrored the same spark she used to have. On weekends, they would take trips to the park or visit museums, creating memories that felt long overdue yet incredibly precious. For her, this new chapter brought a sense of wholeness she hadn't known she was missing. Growing up, there had always been questions about where she came from, who her biological parents were, why they hadn't been part of her life. Those questions had shaped her in ways she didn't fully understand until now. Meeting him hadn't erased the past, but it had given her answers. More importantly, it had given her a future, one filled with love, support, and opportunities she had only dreamed of before. One day, while cleaning out an old storage unit, she stumbled upon a box labeled Memories. Inside were mementos from her childhood, school report cards, birthday cards from her adoptive parents, and faded photographs of holidays and celebrations. As she sifted through the contents, she realized how much her adoptive family had done for her. They had given her stability, love, and a foundation to build her life upon. Yet there was also a gap, an emptiness she couldn't quite name. She called him later that evening, asking if he wanted to go through some of the items with her. When they sat down together, side by side on the floor of her living room, she showed him pictures of herself as a child, the awkward phases, the toothless grins, the moments of pure happiness captured on film. For the first time, he saw glimpses of the life she had lived without him, and it hit him hard. "Thank you for sharing this," he said softly, his voice thick with emotion. "I wish I could have been there for all of it." She placed a hand on his arm, offering a reassuring smile. "You're here now. That's what matters." Their bond grew even stronger as they delved into these shared moments. She began asking questions about her early years, the ones he remembered vividly, and he told her stories about her toddler days, her fascination with stargazing, and the way she used to sing made-up songs at the top of her lungs. Each story painted a picture of the little girl he had lost, helping her piece together fragments of her identity. But it wasn't just about the past. Together, they looked toward the future too. With his help, she enrolled in night classes to finish her degree, determined to build a better life for herself and her son. He encouraged her every step of the way, celebrating her victories and comforting her during setbacks. When she graduated, standing proudly in her cap and gown, he beamed with pride, not just because she had succeeded, but because she had done it on her own terms. Her success inspired him to reflect on his own legacy. For years, he had measured his worth by the size of his bank account and the deals he closed. Now he saw value in something far greater, the impact he could have on others' lives. His nonprofit organization flourished, reuniting dozens of families torn apart by adoption, mix-ups, or other tragedies. He traveled across the country, speaking at conferences and sharing their story, hoping to inspire others to seek connection and healing. Through it all, they remained grounded in their humanity. Despite his wealth and influence, he never let it define their relationship. Instead, he focused on being present for her son, for the moments that truly mattered. Whether it was helping her bake cookies for a school event or teaching her son how to ride a bike, he embraced the simplicity of everyday life. One summer, they decided to take a road trip together, just the three of them. They packed snacks, books, and a playlist of songs they both loved, setting off on an adventure neither of them would forget. Along the way, they visited landmarks, explored small towns, and laughed until their sides hurt. At night, they camped under the stars, lying on blankets and pointing out constellations. It was during one of these quiet evenings that she turned to him and said, "Do you remember giving me this locket?" He nodded, his eyes softening as he gazed at the pendant around her neck. "Of course. I picked it out because I knew you. Loved the stars. It's funny," she said, smiling faintly. "I spent so many years wondering why my birth mom left it with me. I thought it was supposed to mean something, like maybe she wanted me to find her someday. But now I know, it wasn't meant for her. It was meant for us." Her words struck a chord deep within him. Tears welled up in his eyes as he reached out to hold her hand. "It led me back to you," he whispered. "And that's all that matters." By the time they returned home, their bond felt unshakable. They had faced challenges, celebrated triumphs, and created countless memories along the way. Life wasn't without its struggles. They still argued occasionally, still had moments of doubt, but they faced everything as a team. Years later, as she stood beside him at the opening of a new community center funded by his nonprofit, she realized how far they had come. The building was dedicated to providing resources for families affected by adoption, offering counseling, education, and support services. Standing there, surrounded by people whose lives had been touched by their work, she felt a profound sense of gratitude. "This is amazing," she said, looking up at him with admiration. "You've done so much good." He shook his head, placing a gentle hand on her shoulder. "We've done it together. None of this would have been possible without you." In the end, their story wasn't just about finding each other. It was about rediscovering themselves. Through forgiveness, patience, and love, they had built a life that honored the past while embracing the future. And though their journey had been anything but ordinary, it proved one thing above all else. Sometimes, the smallest acts of kindness can lead to the greatest transformations.